Hello and welcome to Dice and Demons. I'm Emma and today I want to show you how I paint one of the new Cavaliers for the Cities of Sigmar box that Games Workshop kindly sent to me. And I had a lot of thought going in how I wanted to paint these armor plates that you can see here on the top of the horse. Obviously I could just paint it in, metal colors, in a sort of rusty iron or very bright iron or gold or whatever. But then I thought I wanted to do something that had a little bit more color to it. Well, that's a huge shock for my channel. So I looked it up and you could definitely have enameled armor in the Middle Ages and in the Renaissance. So that I thought that is exactly what I'm going to go with. And to just make it a little bit more visually interesting, I decided to go with a sort of diamond pattern, as you can see me drawing here with a pencil. And you could do this, incredibly precisely using a ruler and stuff, but I thought I could more or less just eyeball it and hope that it would look all right in the end. I'm a little bit lazy at times, and doing really precise measurements on a model, that's just not my idea of fun. So if I don't have to do it, I probably won't. So I painted first the blue squares using a color from Vallejo, and this one is called Magic Blue, and I mixed it in with a little bit of black paint and a little bit of Wraithbone, which is a beige paint from Citadel, because I wanted it to look a little bit desaturated. I wanted to try something different from my normal, of course, very vibrant colors. So I wanted to do something that was just a little bit less sort of garish and a little bit more, well, probably not realistic looking, but just slightly more. For the second color, I decided to go with purple because, who doesn't love a nice purple, right? And so I mixed in some Midnight Purple from Vallejo with a bit of Ultraviolet from Huge Miniatures. The last one is actually a fluorescent paint, but you can't see it here because it's just, it's mixed in so heavily with the other color that it was just to give it a slightly more warm and a little bit more lively tone, I suppose. Then I decided I wanted to shade these diamonds, and so I decided to mix in just a little bit more black in the original blue color I had mixed up, and I used that on the top of the diamond. And of course, you might be thinking, why are you going to do the darker colors on top and the lighter ones at the bottom? And that's just because I thought it would look a little bit more interesting and be a little bit more fun than what I would usually do, where I would of course usually place the lighter ones on top where they would be more likely to be hit by the sunlight, for instance. I then mixed in a little bit more Wraithbone again with the original blue color and used that as the lighter color. As you can probably tell, these two colors are not exactly well blended in with each other, but I also thought I didn't want to spend like ages doing perfect glazing. So I just took the first blue color I had used sort of to paint the diamond patterns originally, and I sort of stippled that in the middle to create the illusion of a blend. And I think when you have so many small details such as this is completely fine. You're not going to be focusing on the individual diamond pattern anyway, so it doesn't matter if they're not completely perfect, which they are not. But I'm painting stuff that I think will look cool on the tabletop. I'm not painting for painting competitions or anything. In that case, you would definitely need to smooth it out quite a bit. For the last layer of highlight that I'm doing almost like you would do sort of edge highlighting or something, I just mix in quite a bit more of the Wraithbone. So this is more or less just Wraithbone with a slight blue tint to it. Then for darkening the purple patterns, I just used the Vallejo Midnight Purple without anything else mixed in. It's quite a dark color on its own, so I thought that would just work really well and be very easy to do, because of course the more time you spend mixing colors, the longer the painting process will take, and the more likely you are to end up with some mishaps where you can't exactly get back to the first color you mixed up. For the highlight color, I just used the same Midnight Purple mixed with the Ultraviolet. Just here you have a bunch more of the Ultraviolet mixed in. And again, this is, as I said, a fluorescent color, but it doesn't really show up here as much because it is still mixed in with something else. And besides, purple just isn't as neon on its own as other fluorescent colors are. And as you can see here, I just used the original base color with this sort of stippling technique to create the illusion of a smooth transition between light and shadow. I then used the ultraviolet on its own as a sort of, again, edge highlight like I did for the blue. And I thought it looked quite nice, but it still needed just a little touch of something else. So I ended up mixing the ultraviolet with a bit of the wraithbone to make a final highlight just for the tip of the diamond patterns. And I think that worked really well, and also helped make sure that this looks a little bit more muted than my usual color schemes, because usually if I wanted something that was very bright and something that would really make a highlight pop, I would probably have, used a fluorescent pink color. But for this particular color scheme, I wanted to try something else, and I'm actually quite happy with it. Once I was done painting the colors on the patterns, I grabbed a Black Legion, which is a contrast paint, and I used that to carefully paint a black outline around each and every shape to make sure that it looked nice and sharp, because I think sort of more graphical looking patterns like this, they just tend to look better if they look as sharp as you can make them. Then for the horse itself, I wanted it to be a palomino, so a very light sort of brown tan color. And I thought I could of course just go with a brown undertone, but I thought it would be nice to have something a little bit different and something that would help make it look a little bit more visually interesting and a little bit more a little bit more alive somehow. So I grabbed my Volupus Pink contrast paint and I used that to give the entire horsey an undercoat. And by the way, I'm painting this in sub-assemblies as I usually do, but you'll notice that the top half here of the horse is sort of very flat and generic, and that actually means that you can combine the upper and lower halves of the knights in the box any which way you choose, so you don't have to have like just 5 sets of cavaliers, and then if you want an entire army of guys on horseback, they are all going to end up looking the same. No, you can mix and match, and the same goes for the heads and the shields and so on, which I think is a really nice touch, because it means you can actually do a lot of variation within your army, and that's just always a great thing. I then decided to use some Skeleton Horde contrast paint for sort of the base color for the horse, and the reason for that is that while Skeleton Horde on its own is of course meant to be used for painting skeletons, I thought with the purple, or well, the pink undertone, it would just get a little bit darker, and it would also still allow you to see the pinkish tones underneath, and I thought that would make the horse look perhaps just a little bit more vibrant and a little bit more sort of alive. And I ended up being actually fairly happy with it. Then I took the Skeleton Horde and I mixed it with some Wraithbone, and I did a couple of glazes, trying to just highlight some of the spots where I thought it was just a little bit too dull and it needed a little touch extra. And I did a few passes of this with highlights that just got progressively lighter and ended up with just pure Wraithbone that I had thinned down to a glaze. For all the cloth on the horse, I decided I wanted a color that would contrast well with the sort of basic color of the horse itself, but also work well with the blue and purple on the armor plates. And so I decided to go for green, but again, a more muted green than what I would usually do. And so I'm using a contrast paint that is called Gut Ripper Flesh. And I've never used it before, but I actually quite like it. I think it's I just think there's something, I mean, Gut Ripper Flesh sounds a little bit disgusting, but I don't think the color in and of itself is disgusting. I actually think it's quite nice. I then mixed in a little bit of Snake Brown Leather, which is also a contrast paint, and I used that for doing shadows. And as you can see here, because it was on cloth, I decided that I would use my cross-hatching technique to add the shadows and highlights, just to make sure that you could tell there was a bit of a difference between cloth and armor. I then grabbed another color. This one is called Dead Flesh, and it's from Game Color, and I used that again with the cross-hatching as the first layer of highlights. And once I was happy with that, I just added a touch of Wraithbone as the final highlight color. Of course, usually in my painting process, I would go for some much more vibrant colors, like, a neon yellow or something, but I thought for this particular painting project, that would just, I don't know, it would look slightly off, so I went with the more muted and more realistic tones, which was actually quite a fun challenge. And here you can see the finished result. I'm actually quite happy with it. I thought it was very fun to paint something that was so different from what I usually do. And I just thought these more more muted color tones just fit this model somehow a little bit better than my usual palette. And yeah, it was, as I said, it was quite fun and quite challenging because I had the sort of gut feeling all the time, oh, it just needs to pop a little bit more, I just need to add a little bit more neon, and I just did not want to cave in. And I think this is the first time in 2 years or something that I actually just went with the original idea of something that was not very bright and very neon, and it was it was quite challenging, but it was very fun. While painting this model, I remembered that one of the first Warhammer models I ever painted was actually also a knight, and I think this one is a Bretonnian knight for the old Warhammer fantasy battles, and it was just so much fun. I actually had it on a shelf and I could go pick it up and look at it and compare the two, and I think that's actually a really nice idea because from time to time it feels like you don't make any progress, at least that's how I feel in my painting, that I don't get any better and it's just the same things I always do. And it was just really nice to go back and see that, yeah, I have actually improved a little bit. And while I don't think you should compare yourself to others, at least not unless you are going to painting competitions and you are very motivated by that, it is nice to compare yourself to like the way you paint today to your older stuff and just notice how far you've come. That's that's just sort of free motivation for painting right there, I guess. So that was what I wanted to show you today, and I would of course be really interested in hearing your thoughts on this a bit more muted way of painting models. Is this something you're interested in seeing more of, or do you think I should just stick to the neon paints because that is why you are actually coming to this channel in the first place? Of course, I would also like to thank my patrons who support this channel. I really appreciate it, guys. So thank you so much to Thomas Madsen, Scott Broadway, Jordan Hollands, Andrew Correa, Anthony Polcastro, Queen's Wolf, JJ Walsh, Gwenna L, Mola Mola, TJ Kubiak, Mando Project, Starcon85, S. Beer, Economicus, Firelord21, and Elliot Philby. If you also want to help support Dice and Demons, you can do so over on Patreon, and I'll leave a link to that in the show notes. Also remember that you can follow Dice and Demons over on Twitter and Instagram if you want to stay up to date on my painting projects. So thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye!